it's called Compassion's Path. But what you need to know is that I wrote it after driving through a sandstorm when we were driving back from Baghdad to Oman. And driving through a sandstorm is terrifying. Anybody ever been in a sandstorm? You can appreciate this. The sand seeps into the car. You start sneezing. And you cannot see a thing. It's like a whiteout, only it's a brownout. And you have to keep going on the highway. Because our driver told us that there were car accidents because you couldn't see anything in front of you, you just keep going. And then he handed this roll of Scotch tape to Rick, who was sitting in the passenger seat, and said, okay, if you see a crack starting to form, put a piece of tape on it. Because our driver said he'd had the experience of the windshield imploding into the car. Well, I have no idea if Scotch tape would have prevented that. But I will tell you is that all eyes were riveted on the front windshield. And luckily, we didn't have a crack. But that night, this poems get given. And this is the poem that was given after that. And I think what it is, it's about compassion's path. Is the title of it. And it's about letting your heart be broken, opening up, letting something new happen. And it goes like this. We walk a sandstorm of impotence, isolated dread, the demons of our day. We walk a sandstorm of half-truths, lies of ochre, beige, tan, sepia confusion, pelted, buffeted by winds of war. We walk a sandstorm of drifting, elusive truth, wandering ways and blind following. We walk a sandstorm eroded by demanding doubt, overwhelmed by the horror swirling round, invading lungs and lives. We walk a sandstorm of promised grief, aching temptation to hunker down and hide until a more propitious time. But in this time of alluring weakness, in this time of fearful groaning, cold, blind logic, anger rising, remember the clear-eyed anchor of our resolve. Remember the eyes of Mayada, Sarah, Rita, Hassan, Abdullah, Makbula, and many more. We may be blinded in the outward journey, but remember this inner core. May the eyes of family, terrors of family, set fire to our impotence, stoke our resolve, melt the cold stone of our hearts to yield to tears. For like rain, tears shed, settle sandstorms. Like rain, tears shed, clear the air. Like rain, tears shed, reveal the path. So let us weep. Let us embody healing tears. Let us be copious tears to settle our country's storm.
Where's that from?
Me. It's going to be in my book. I actually have a book coming on sale April 15th, and HarperCollins would be really happy if you bought it. It's appropriately titled "The Nun on the Bus." Anyway, but it'll be interesting, but I am going to have some of my poetry in it. To wrap up this last piece, I just wanted to do a little bit more on culture, because I think one of the challenges within the Catholic tradition that we're facing is the challenge of two different views of culture that are really difficult. And that the struggle within the American Catholic Church really is not about faith. It's about culture. And it's the culture of monarchy versus the culture of democracy. In the culture of monarchy, it's the responsibility of the king to provide leadership, right? In a culture of democracy, it's the responsibility of the group to set the direction. In a culture of democracy, resources are given out by the king. In a democracy, resources are held by the group, we the people, allegedly. We try to do this. And policy is decided by one, whereas policy is decided by the vote of all. Now, one of the really interesting things for me is that I have struggled with, and the reason Catholic Sisters got in trouble is because we were all about democracy. We had the gall to have a different opinion about the Affordable Care Act. That's what really set them off. and we got public with it. And so we did politics different. Well, but it made the monarchs upset. Sorry. Not really. And so, but here's the irony. Okay, so I've spent a long time talking about, you know, this is the struggle, this is what we're doing, yada, yada. But you know what happens? When you get a good monarch, change happens a lot faster. Think of the difference between Pope Francis's leadership and President Obama's leadership. President Obama's got all this challenge dealing with Congress and getting a vote and how do you do this and yada yada. Whereas Frank, long live the king. I mean, so there's pluses and minuses in this. This is much more dependent about the who holds the role. This is way more dependent about how are we in this together and how do we move forward. We'll talk some more about that this afternoon, but I wanted to set that up. Is that clear? Okay, so every culture has some benefits. We just have to figure out how do we have conversation across that difference. Some of the big struggles in parishes are pastors thinking they're kings, yes, and the people thinking they ought to participate. Challenge. Okay. All right. Now, the piece we're going to do right now are the principles of Catholic social teaching, and how does that inform your lives, your investment in this community that nurtures a prophetic imagination. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to walk through it, literally, and what I want you to think about are these two questions. So which one, and I'm going to ask you to pick one. What one aspect of Catholic social teaching we're going to talk about really draws your heart? Usually there's one that just kind of like, that's me, I love it, I'm in it, that's for me. And then listen also for the one that you think, you gotta be kidding. It's not for me, I don't like it. Ugh. Whose bright idea was that one anyway? Okay, got it? So those are the two pieces that you're gonna look for as we talk about the principles of Catholic social teaching. And I have handy little guides for you. Here's the next one. I think we need one more, at least one more. Okay, I tried to divvy these up so it'll go faster. See how this theory works. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Looks like it. Okie doke. Now, I'm going to walk around. I've posted these little signs over here, and I'm going to gesture. I posted the stand so you don't have to look into the sun that is coming out, and you will be drawn into the outdoors. Okay, so on the bishop's website, they've changed their list to 7. We still work with 9. This is the old list. I love saying that the bishops have a new thing. But ironically, the one that they, everybody got some? One of the ones that they took from being a one by itself is participation. Why am I not surprised? But anyway, we keep it, we're old-fashioned at Network, and we keep them separate. But we all know that the first basic principle is the dignity of the human person. Now, what's so important with the dignity of the human person is that we are each created by God with talents, gifts, opportunities, promise. And it is that relationship to the divine that we all embody God in some fashion that is all about the dignity of the individual. And Pope Francis is doing a fabulous job of lifting that up in a complex way, because too often in our recent past, this one principle has only gone for the conversation about abortion. That's right. Which is only about birth and not about life. which drives me nuts. But anyway, so I say I'm pro-life, not just pro-birth. In sort of my... So the dignity of a human person is at the heart of all of who we are, made by God. And the struggle in direct service, especially with people at the margins, is to give them the chance to live in dignity. If you cannot feed your family, if you cannot house your family, if you cannot care, you can't live in dignity. I mean, homeless folks struggle deeply with this because it is so hard to hold life together, minute to minute. And then knowing that part of our role in a community that nurtures a prophetic imagination is to touch the pain of that incapacity to live your dignity. And sometimes, I mean, things like issues of mental health for anybody, issues of struggle in families, issues of financial stress. There's so many issues that can, a couple of you were talking to me about gun violence issues. I mean, that can undermine the dignity of an individual so quickly, so quickly. So that the idea is that our challenge in Catholic social teaching is that we respect the dignity of all individuals, and therefore they have a right to access to the basic necessities of life. Now, I love that the Pope in his exhortation does the economic analysis. Read the 3rd chapter of his exhortation, it's fabulous. But you know what he says is that capitalism has failed. Trickle-down economics failed. It was an unproven theory that never worked. And that income inequality is eroding the dignity of all. And that the challenge is, in a capitalist system, is that we have private ownership for the sake of the common good. And we'll talk more about that. But that the dignity of each individual is that each individual has a right to food, shelter, clothing, education, healthcare. What a radical thought. And some on the conservative dimension want to say that's communism or socialism or something. Marxism. I don't. They don't have a clue as to what Marxism is. It is not shared ownership. The Pope affirms the validity of individual ownership, but ownership with responsibility. That it's responsibility for the common good. Okay, so dignity of the human person is at the heart of Catholic social teaching. The second is the social nature of the human person. Now, many want you to think that we're in this alone. It's all about individualism. I'm responsible for myself. That is antithetical to Catholic social teaching. Catholic social teaching says we, by creation, by how God made us, are in this together. And only in the richest nation on earth could we ever possibly think we could do this alone. I mean, it's nuts. Our money can ensure this. Some of us were talking about my gig on Stephen Colbert, who's just too funny for words. Some of you have seen it. It's too hysterical. But Stephen, who you know is this comedian who looks all conservative, he always teases me. He's always about holding on to his stuff, and he wants to hoard it, and it's all about him. And so my response to him is, no, it's about sharing. You have to let go of your stuff in order to hold hands with others. But it's that call which is at the heart of Catholic social teaching. And I must say, it's at the heart of the Constitution, too. And so it's an unpatriotic lie that we're based in individualism as a nation. I mean, you know, Ronald Reagan started this. It's so wonderful to be with a group who knows who Ronald Reagan was. But he started it with the political ad about riding off into the West by himself, that the West, he redid the story of who the U.S. is. Because our history was in wagon trains, in building circles, in communities across the West. It was not the lone guy riding off. I mean, did you ever hear of a barn raising where just one person showed up? Yeah. Or a quilting bee where just one person showed up? It is an unpatriotic lie that we're based in individualism. And the reason that they want to perpetuate it is to keep wealth isolated. so that you don't have the common good. So the social nature of the human person. The next one is the solidarity of the human family. What that means is not only are we social, okay, that could be smaller groups, but we're in this together. And that my concern for you needs to be as strong as my concern for myself. So that when I'm making decisions, I consider the folks in the Congo, South Sudan. Oh, what's happening in South Sudan is just tragic. The folks in central DC, or at the McKenna Center, or at any of the places we work, that some of my decisions are made in light of the fact we're in this together. This is a tough one, because even Pope Benedict, in his encyclical Charity and Truth, said all economic decisions are moral decisions. And in a first world nation where we just had Christmas and all the Christmas shopping, each one of those decisions were moral decisions. So I solved my problem. I gave most people gift memberships to Network. I thought that was a moral. But the challenge is, and I just made a big purchase. For me, it was a big purchase. I got one of those. Somebody gave me money, and I got one of those Keurig coffee things. Because I live alone in an apartment, and it'd be really nice, it'd be so handy, it'd be really sweet. I had a big moral dilemma. And then I found out a way that you can recycle all those little pods, and then you get refillable pods, and I figured it all out. And it would save electricity. I rationalized it pretty well. But it's about how are we in relationship? That my decisions are in relationship to others. Was it made in a good way? Did their workers get compensated? You know, all those questions. It gets really complicated. But we're in this together. So I hold your concerns as close as my own. That's a contemplative life, too. We'll talk more about that this afternoon. The option for the poor, only Catholic bishops would think it's an option. If you plan to follow Jesus, you got to stand with the poor. And these are, I posted them not quite in the same list as this, but to stand with the poor is at the heart of Francis's reality. And the reason is this. It's not because we're going to fully change the poor or get rid of poverty. We're working to get rid of poverty, to share the wealth. Because having solidarity, we know that I've got so much, then I've got a responsibility to share, right? But the poor bring us into relationship. Because we, in the wealthiest nation on earth, can hide behind our walls, our stuff, our management, our control. But the poor know, show us the way that we're in this together. We cannot be separate. We are not separate. And so poverty becomes at the heart of what Jesus was about. Now, if you read the gospel with the idea that Jesus touched the pain of the world, you'll find all of the miracles is Jesus walked towards trouble, towards pain all the time. Remember the story of those 10 guys who wanted to be healed? You know, the lepers. Making a big noise, big noise, big noise. Well, you know, sometimes I just sort of like to pretend I didn't hear them, right? Mm-hmm. Jesus walked towards them. Remember the story of the centurion who comes to Jesus and says, well, could you heal my servant? And Jesus said, oh, yeah, I'll come. He said, oh, and the centurion's faith was so amazing. Oh, no, you don't have to come. I mean, I order people around all the time. But if you just say it, it'll be enough. So Jesus not only followed what the centurion wanted, but believed the faith of the centurion. Now, one of my meditations has gotten to be recently to wondering, did Jesus send the apostles off to find out what happened? Or was Jesus content to know? Did Jesus have enough faith to know that his choosing to be with the centurion was sufficient without knowing the result? Isn't that amazing? You never hear about what happened. What's the rest of the story, like that guy used to say on the radio? Jesus knew his part in solidarity, but that he chose to be with those in need. That's what we're calling. Okay. Then we've got, where did I put them? Now, I ran out of windows. And then we have the common good up here. The fact, and Pope Francis's exhortation is fabulous on this, is that it's the call to the benefit of all. Now, what he points out is that it's this economic inequality, income inequality, that is the source of violence in our society and eroding our sense of community. Now, get me back some time to do this whole thing on income inequality, and I go on and on about it. But just know that there are fixes. You can go on our website. We had two programs. One is Mind the Gap. It's about income inequality. And then Mend the Gap, which we just finished in the fall, which is all about 4 policies that we could do that would change the direction of income inequality. It is not, and Pope Francis is so clear, that yes, we need a safety net in the interim, but the safety net is not the answer. And too often, Republicans are fighting about free market can rule, and Democrats are fighting about safety net, but nobody is working on the structural changes that we need to change the direction of where we're going. I think Catholic social teaching demands that we move in that direction. Said she with authority. And it's all about the common good, that everyone benefits. It drives me nuts that the top CEOs' income has soared while all of the people that are creating their wealth have been flat. That's not the common good. Common good means more like the Costco method. If Costco's doing well, everybody benefits. It's kind of nice to have a good example. Okay, common good. What do we got? Participation, my favorite. This is the deal. Often we want to think about civil rights in our society, and I think civil rights have been this idea of everybody has a right to participate. Well, the piece that we've missed, and the piece that I'm starting to talk about, is civil obligations. Not only is it a right, it's a responsibility. And so that this all need to be involved. So that my right to vote, you think like it's discretionary. I've got a right, but I don't have to do it. No. In a democracy, responsibility is held by the group. If you don't exercise your obligation, you're surrendering to a monarchy. Our practice, our theory, our experiment in this nation is to say we can do it together. And it drives me nuts that our media want us to think politics is like a sporting game. Because it makes us couch potatoes. We sit and watch. The Super Bowl's coming up. In my family right now, everybody, yes, it's true. We're all divided up among the 4 teams that are left. Some of you are sports people. And everybody wants a different one. I am a 49er fan. And my nephew is a Seattle Seahawks. My sister is like this Denver Broncos. I mean, it's just like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Big fights, big fights. But that couch potato mentality, yeah, you can cheer, you eat. The only time I let myself eat tortilla chips. And but it makes us spectators. And to use that image with politics makes us spectators in a very serious participative project. So I'm saying that our civil obligations require us to be informed, to make sure there's room at the table for everybody, and that people exercise what is very serious work, democracy. And ironically, Catholic social teaching tells us we're all supposed to be participating. Now, this is one of the cases where our writings are ahead of our practice within the church itself, which is kind of, we've done a lot like that. It's kind of dear. Women are equal. Well, not here. All right, we won't go there. Let's see, okay, so we've got common good, participation, dignity of work. Everyone's work has equal dignity. The CEO is as dignified as the janitor. And it is really important to lift up all work as inherently dignified. So some of this means a living wage for folks doing the most menial work. Some of this means, in my community, Mike and I were driving out here, we were talking about the Jesuit spirituality and all this, and I realized that my community is Benedictine. And I wonder, how does Benedict show up in what we do? This is one place where it does, is we all do some of the manual labor. In December, where was that? I was someplace. I was at a college, and things needed to be arranged. Well, my instinct is just kind of pitch in and help rearrange furniture. Because it's as dignified, and some people were horrified. The speaker was really, did that mean? No, it just mean you needed help. I mean, but it's who we are. Do we all participate in making stuff happen? Or do I stand on my dignity and wait for the minions to take care of? Good question. Then comes these, let's do ecological responsibility first. That's an easier one to get. Pope Francis is fabulous on this, that because of income inequality, because of the exploitation of the earth, our ecological responsibility is not being exercised. We're sucking everything out of the earth. And fracking is a perfect example. Not sure how we deal with this. It's giving us energy independence, but at what price, glory? And then we just had that spill over in West Virginia where they couldn't drink the water for weeks. What kind of caretaking is this about? And that's where this free market idea is totally nuts. Regulation is supposed to try to help keep us safe. Yes, we can overdo regulation, but the fact is, some regulation is required, especially of dangerous industries that are run on rivers. Hello. Otherwise, we're just going to pollute the planet. We've got to wake up to it. So it's a complex issue, but it's part of Catholic social teaching that we need to reverence the earth. And Pope Francis makes it abundantly clear that it's not just individual human dignity. All creation has a dignity to be valued and to be reverenced. And then finally, this one, material things available for all. This is the one the bishops leave out, in addition to participation. They just lump it into ecology. But this, I really think, is at the heart of Frank's approach to the common good and the role of private ownership. That because I own something, my job is to protect it and share it. And I am a steward for all. That things should be available. So you too could come over to my house and use my coffee pot. But the challenge is, we don't think this way. If I got private ownership, I put up the fence and I say no trespassing. Frank's point is, in Catholic social teaching, is we have to find a way to share. And that all of creation is given not just for our generation or our children, but to our children's children's children. We're responsible for the future. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, we're going to do something a little bit different for the conversation on this one. Everybody, pick one that you feel like, ooh, yeah, that's me. I just feel drawn to that. I'm excited by it. It stirs my heart. It's what I want to do. It's where my heart lives. So we're going to have about like a couple of minutes to do that.